Hello and welcome to Matthew Reads. I guess I am here to share with you that the fact the sleigh has indeed been slain, and I'm talking about Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune.
Well, just as I thought.
Brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular.
So I will say, very first point, I've been very confused about like the release schedule for this book because I got this as like a US import from a little, indie bookshop portal in York. And I mean, I'm not exactly sure when the release date in the UK was, but I know it's been very recent. And I will say, for the sakes of this video, there will be one instance where I'm mentioning like spoilers, but I will put like a specific spoiler warning on screen and like a little timestamp like when to skip to for if you don't want to get any spoilers at all. And I would also like to mention that, like, in the first few pages of this book, like, there is an author's note that, it does mention, like, I'm just going to read off my notes. The book talks about life and death in different forms, including suicide and grief. And, it finishes up by saying, please read with care. So, if that, like, the things that it says there, if that feels like something you feel like you should avoid, that might be worth taking into consideration, and I, just wanted to mention it myself as well. And I will say, because this is something I'm not great at doing now, I am going to do the little YouTuber thing. Feel free to like the video if you like it at any point. If you really like me and, the way that I, talk about books, feel free to subscribe. And, if you have any thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comments. So, our good old friend the blurberer, she says that when a reaper collects Wallace from his own funeral, he begins to suspect he might be dead. Then Hugo, the owner of a tea shop, says he'll help him cross over. And then that is when Wallace decides that he's definitely dead. Then Wallace is given 7 days to live a life that he's barely lived. So, yeah, when I read that, I was immediately like, uh-oh. Like, this seems like it has some similarities to the book that I'm currently writing and, planning on querying out soon. But, then I'll say, like, it took me, like, literally 1 second to think that, like, the only similarity was that, like, the main characters are ghosts. Like, that was pretty much the only similarity. Like, my book and this one, they explore two very different things. And I'll be honest, as I read through the book, like, those worries that I had, they definitely, like, started to fade away as I realised just, like, how different the two books were. So, I felt much better at the end there. So, yeah, we open up on chapter 1, as, most of the time we do, on our main character, Wallace. And, like, in this very first chapter, we get shown that he is a monumental arse. Like, he's literally firing a woman from her job at the law firm like he works at because she filed something 2 hours after the deadline. But then at the end of the chapter he dies. And I will say that's not a spoiler considering the blurb literally mentions how that he's dead. So that isn't a spoiler or anything. But yeah, then it's like the fun of he gets collected at his own funeral. The funeral which also shows us what a sad little life that Wallace had,
Dear Lord, what a sad little life, Jane.
With all of the grace and decorum of a reversing dump truck. The only people who actually, like, turn up to his funeral are his ex-wife and, like, I think it's, like, the 3 partners from his law firm. And then there's this one specific quote I'd like to read from my notes. It's on page 108, where, Wallace thinks, or he says, what else was there to life aside from success? Nothing, really. And, that singular line told me literally everything there was to know about, how Wallace lived when he was alive. And, I do think it's, like, quite impressive that, like, he can be encapsulated, in that singular sentence as well. But yeah, then we do meet May, his reaper, who she's out on her first solo reaping. And, she tells him that, she's taking him to meet Hugo, the ferryman who's going to help him cross over. All very much stuff that's, on the blurb. And, one thing I will mention now is May and all of the other characters. There weren't, like, that many characters. It was quite a small cast, something I very much appreciated. Like, close to the beginning, they all kept cracking these just god-awful, like, ghost jokes and puns about being dead. Because, like, one of the characters mentioned, and this is another quote I've got, like, they said, if you're laughing, you're not crying mostly. And, like, you know, there's a few of these, you know, horrendous ghost puns, like, in quick succession. They're on page 122 and 23. You know, that I just want to include, because for as awful as they were, I did love them. Because I do love, you know, a dad joke and a shit pun. Like, I love them. But, you know, there is, what is a ghost's favourite fruit? Blueberries. What kind of a street does a ghost live on? A dead end. But yeah, May brings Wallace to the tea shop, which is actually, you know, the one that's on the front cover. So, you know, it was cute to get, like, I guess a fun representation of it. You know, and, like, I'd say probably, like, 90-95% of the book takes place in this tea shop. And again, this is another thing I appreciate because, like, I like an open world in video game alone. Like, when it comes to, like, books, I am a fan. Maybe it's just because it's the way I write. Like, I tend to not have all that many settings. So, like, to see, you know, how sort of the way that I write my, you know, stories, or, you know, reflected back in this. But, like, I appreciated that. But yeah, Wallace ends up meeting Hugo, the ferryman, Nelson, Hugo's grandfather, Apollo, a ghost dog, and then, like, along with May and Wallace, like, those five, I'd say, are probably the main cast of this book. There are a few, like, other characters, but they're just, like, minor characters that sort of, like, come and go. And then, like, in chapter 6, we learn that Hugo is gay, which we very much love and appreciate. So, yeah, and when we learned that, I was very much like, does Wallace maybe then have a crush on Hugo? And then in chapter 12, like, we get the confirmation that Wallace is bi. Then I was like, oh yeah, so he's definitely got a crush on him then. I don't know, it's one of the, like, this is one of those books, like, because it isn't, like, explicitly, like, because it isn't YA, like, I didn't know whether it was gonna, you know, for lack of better phrasing, be gay or not. So, you know, to find out that 2 of the 5 main characters are queer, I was like, wig, let's go, girls. But yeah, then a little later we learned that May, as a Reaper, she was pretty much, like, assigned to Hugo. And then I more or less deduced, it wasn't that hard to figure out. If you read the book, you'd figure it out yourself. That, like, the order of things is that, like, someone dies, the Reaper collects them and takes them to the ferry person, and then the ferry person helps them cross over to the afterlife. Like, that seemed to be, like, the order of things, like, in this world, in this book. So it was basically Hugo's job to help Wallace realise what a sad little life he had lived, basically. But yeah, it turned out that, like, May wasn't Hugo's first Reaper, and that, like, he had another one before her. And, like, as Wallace and Hugo get to know each other, like, Hugo mentions that, like, he, like, made mistakes with his past Reaper, so at first I, like, because we got told that Hugo was gay, I was like, oh, did Hugo fall in love with his Reaper? Is that the mistake that happened? And, like, I'm not going to spoil, like, what actually happened, but you do find out what happens. And I'll be honest, like, when that point in the book happened, I was kind of gagged by it. I won't lie, it wasn't what I was expecting at all. And as, like, you know, as part of the story, Wallace is, you know, he's spending his time in this tea shop with, you know, with the whole gang. But during all of this time, like, another ghost turns up, and, like, there's this one line that, like, the other ghost says that I just want to include here. And he says this, like, the ghost says this to me, "You don't tell me what I want to hear." And, you know, I thought this was, like, a really interesting line to include in the story. Because, like, we get told pretty early on that, like, different people deal with being dead in different ways. So, you know, the fact that this other ghost, you know, turned up, acted the way that they did, like, I thought that was, like, a really nice way to show that as well. And, you know, there is, like, a third character, Cameron. I won't talk about Cameron too much, but, like, they're not in the story that, like, I'd say they're a side character, but, you know, they are another example. They're, like, a third example of, like, showing how different people deal with, like, their deaths, as opposed to just, like, telling us. So I think Klune did, like a really good job there. Also, as another point for when the second ghost turns up, this is, like, at the point where Wallace definitely has a crush on Hugo. And, like, the thing is, because there's this second ghost, like second newer ghost, it means that like Wallace no longer had, you know, Hugo's undivided attention. And I loved this because it was like fun seeing Hugo go. It was fun seeing Wallace going from this, you know, basically unloving asshole to pretty much a jealous child. You know, he was jealous because the boy he liked is paying attention to someone else. Like, I really enjoyed that. And also, that bit in the blurb where it says that Wallace is given, like, 7 days a week to cross over, that happened only, like, at the final 100 pages of the book. And, like, the real good thing about that was that, like, even though it said it in the blurb, I completely forgot about it until it happened, you know, because I was having such a good time reading the rest of the book. So like when it did come around, like it came around and said, surprise bitch, you know, you really thought you'd seen the last of me. And you know, the events that follow in those final 7 days, you know, the rumours may say that I did cry at chapter 21 and 22 and the epilogue, but who's to say whether that's true or not? Now, I do have to say, like, one bit that made me stop and go a bit, like, it was just a singular word choice on page 354. Like, the word goose flesh was used in place of, like, what I know to be, like, goosebumps. You know, like, when something makes you shudder and you get that, like, those little bumps on your arm. Like, to me, that is, like, they are goosebumps. Like, that's what I know them as. And, like, because the book called them goose flesh, like, this is a word that I'd never heard used before, and it did just kind of, like, me for a second. But, like, literally just for a second. And now, I will say, the ending, like I said, I'm not going to spoil anything. I was happy with the ending, you know, it worked well with how my brain likes to perceive things, you know, in this utopian world where everyone's happy all the time. But I will say, I would have been satisfied if the ending had ended the way that I thought it was going to end. And now, at the beginning of the video, when I said I was going to talk about spoilers, this is the bit where I talk about the spoilers, so here is your warning now. There will already be a timestamp on screen for you to skip to if you don't want the spoilers. So yeah, I'll give you an extra few seconds just to, you know, skip over, so let's just sit in silence nicely for like 2 or 3 seconds. Yeah, okay, so for the spoilers, like, I thought Wallace was going to go through the whispering door at the end. And, you know, even though, like I said, I've just mentioned that, like, I have this utopian brain where I, 1, want everything to be queer, and 2, want everything to be happy all the time, I realise that's not feasible. But I would have been okay had Wallace left. Like, I would have been satisfied had that been the ending, because it would have meant that the story would have been, you know, solidly concluded and everything would have been tied up. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I'm certainly not mad that he didn't leave, and, you know, that the book ended gay. Like, I'm just saying, in this instance, I wouldn't have been, like, annoyed, upset, or unsatisfied had he left. Just because it was set up that, like, that was pretty much the natural order of the world. Anyway, the spoilers end here, so yeah, there's that. And, you know, if you have skipped the spoilers, like, this is where we're rejoining. Pretty much the end of the video, I am sorry. Like, as for my final thoughts, am I gonna reread this book? Honestly, yes, like 100%. Although it's likely not gonna be anytime soon. You know, 1, because there are a shitload of other books that I want to read. Also, Christmas is approaching relatively soon, so I likely will get a few more books then. But also, for, you know, for point number 2, because of how heavily this book, you know, talks about, like, life, death, and grief. Like, obviously it's definitely important to have those discussions, but I don't want to be a part of those discussions all the time. Like, these are the kinds of discussions that I feel like I need to be in the right headspace, you know, to take part in. Because, you know, sometimes I just want to read, you know, a mushy rom-com that has, like, no other agenda. But, you know, regardless of that, like, this book was really good. Like, in contention for my book of the year good. And I mean, unless anything in this video that I've said has, like, you know, deterred you from wanting to read it, you know, I definitely recommend that you do, you know, give it a read. So yeah, that is where I'm going to leave this video. Thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, feel free to like the video if you liked it. You know, subscribe if you like me. Ooh, wouldn't that be fun? And, you know, let me know in the comments, you know, have you read Under the Whispering Door? Are you going to read Under the Whispering Door? And, you know, have you read anything else by TJ Klune? Because I've read The Extraordinaries, but that is it. And yeah, that is where I'm going to leave this video, so okay, bye.